Hello all, welcome back to This Day in History for August 22nd, 2024. As you know, it's not about the year, but it's about the importance and the history of the day. I have to apologize because, my lower back is bothering me, so I decided I wasn't going to go to the gym, which meant that I just kind of, was lazy and sleeping into the very last possible moment. Forgot that my pastor was actually going to call me, and he did. And so we had our conversation. I just got out of the shower, as you can see, and I didn't even eat. I'm heading on my way to work right now. So, kill two birds with one stone, I suppose. So I apologize for the background noise being a little what it is. My earbuds are charging because I drained them. But let's get into the birthday, shall we? So the very first birthday it's 1862. Claude Debussy. We've talked about him before. Today is his birthday. I believe that we may have touched on the day that he died. But he was a French composer, and I feel like I have a fat lip. I do. I must have bit my lip or something. I don't know. Anyway, he was a French composer that had a high level of influence on the 20th century. Born in 1862, he heavily influenced the music of the 1900s, which would be the 20th century. 1893, Dorothy Parker. Is that right? Yeah, Parker. She was born on this day. She was an American short story writer, as well as a poet. 1904, this guy's a pretty interesting cat. I had to do a little bit of reading up on him. Deng Xiaoping, I think I pronounced that right. He's a Chinese leader, but what makes him significant is that, yes, he was a Chinese leader when, communism came to China, and, we talk about how communism fell in 1991, and the reason why it fell in the Soviet Union in 1991 is because a lot of it was because they really didn't keep checks and balances like we do, right? We try to keep ourselves out of the red. We try to keep ourselves in the black. Well, the commie reds thought being in the red was a good thing. Maybe, I don't know. They had a collective attitude of, we don't care what it costs, we're going to build it. And we're going to build it to keep up with the Americans. Now, some didn't like Reagan's policies, but one thing that Reagan did do, and he did very well, is yes, while he upped our spending, he upped our deficit up, a bit. But one thing he did is that he literally spent the Soviets into the ground, right? So as he spent more, they spent more. He kept within our budget for the most part. They ran rampant outside of they didn't even have a budget. They didn't keep it. So, and they didn't allow things for free markets or anything like that. So what I'm getting at is that's why communism fell. It couldn't sustain itself in the 80, 90 years, not 90, well, it would be more 70, 80 years that it existed in the Soviet Union. Now, why it still works in China is because of this guy. What Deng Xiaoping did is that while he was the leader of the Communist Party of China, he also incorporated elements of the free enterprise system into their economy, which actually, that's what kept them from falling as a regime, as a communist regime. That's how communism works, is that for all you anti-capitalists out there, for all of you who think that that, capitalism is so evil and free enterprise is just evil. Here's a little nugget for you. It's what makes the world go round, right? Because had China not incorporated a little bit of a free enterprise system, they too would have followed suit. They would have gone under. Look at North Korea, right? North Korea likes to claim that they're doing so well, but they're not. They really aren't. They are doing what the Soviets did, spend, and how they continue to lavishly spend is that they withhold from the people. Their people are starving. And that's not just propaganda on my part. I've actually read, I read an interview with she was a North Korean army lieutenant, and I think, and she said that, she ate better than the troops under her command, and she was eating an apple a day. So, what's that tell you? So, he actually did some good for his country. Granted, they're still a communist country, and they're one of the biggest human rights violators on the planet. And the sick irony there is that they're in charge of the Human Rights Committee in the UN. Go figure. But as far as keeping his country afloat economically, yeah, he did that. So that's a testament to him. So 1920, we see the birth of Ray Bradbury. He's an American writer. Ray Bradbury really got into the horror flicks growing up, and so that kind of that definitely influenced his writing style and the stories that he wrote. I believe that he also he wrote for TV, wrote 4 movies. I remember hearing his name synonymously with Hollywood. So, but a lot of that was his writing was, he got to the notion of, he picked up the pen, he loved it so much that he wrote every day of his life. 1934, we see the birth of H. Norman Schwarzkopf, old Stormin' Norman himself. General Schwarzkopf was a U.S. Army general. He was a buck lieutenant in Vietnam, and then he rose through the ranks. He became the general in charge of operations in the Gulf War, in the 91 Gulf War. He was specifically chosen because he knows the region. His dad was actually the superintendent of the New Jersey State Police. His dad was actually very, very much involved in the Lindbergh baby kidnapping case. And Schwarzkopf talks about this in his book, that the evidence, half the evidence never made it into court. His dad still had, either copies of it or he had that evidence, whatever. But the evidence was so overwhelming that Frank Bruno Hauptmann was actually guilty. He was guilty in Schwarzkopf's mind. I'll just put it that way. I still think that there was a measure of doubt. There was a little bit of reasonable doubt that I don't think that had I been on that jury that I would have convicted, or I certainly wouldn't have convicted for the death penalty. That's just me. But yeah, Stormin' Norman, his birthday was today. Unfortunately, he passed away. I believe it was 2012. He had cancer. He was an extraordinary human being, a good man, as I could tell. I did actually work with a guy who was an Army colonel that worked in the Pentagon, and he had no liking for Schwarzkopf. I think that's probably personal politics coming involved there. But I always had a lot of respect for the colonel. He was a cool guy. I liked him. He was big on hunting and fishing, more so fishing than anything. But he didn't like Schwarzkopf. He thought that he was kind of a dumb guy and not very brilliant when it came to conducting a war. And some of the things that he'd said about him made me question, well, like, I'd question rules of engagement too. You know, I would ask, what do you want me to do here? What is, I would have clarified, okay, what is the overall goal here? What can I do? What can't I do? To prosecute the successful application of this war. I don't see. I don't know. That's just me. I mean, I'm not involved in Army life. I mean, I wasn't in very long. I was only in for 26 days. Arthritis got me bounced out, so I didn't get to go climb through the ranks, and so I really don't have. I can't really speak to whether Schwarzkopf was a good man or a bad man when it comes to his military. But I always liked him. 1941, Bill Parcells. He was born on this day in 1941. He was an American football coach, football executive. I don't know what he's doing now, but I think he was. I'm wanting to say he was the coach for the Bills. I don't know. I'm not sure. 1978. If you were a fan of British humor, if you are a fan of late night show, James Gordon's birthday is today. He is, I'm not a big fan of him. I mean, I'm not a big fan of British humor to begin with, but I never really thought James Gordon was funny. However, in reading up on him, he's won a lot of awards. He holds a title of, in the Order of the British Empire, and that's no small feat. That's respectable. I mean, you have to give the man props for that. So I'll give the man props, but I'm not a big fan of him. So that's it for the birthdays. Let's get back into the history. The year is 1642. The English are having their own civil wars. It's royalists versus the parliamentarians. King Charles I, and what kind of started this off, I saw two conflicting things a little bit. One said that King Charles raised the royal standard at Nottingham, and that's what kind of set it all off. But in reading further, basically what it was is that he chose to raise an army to go deal with some Irish rebels, and that didn't sit well with because he did it without Parliament's approval. He did it without their permission. So there's, they kind of went to war over it, I guess. 1851, we see the very first America's Cup won by the yacht America in the race around the Isle of Wight, WIGHT. 1865, William Shepard received a U.S. patent for liquid soap. I didn't realize that liquid soap was that old. I thought it was actually more of a modern marvel. I thought it was, probably born out of, post-World War II, but apparently it was born out of post-Civil War, U.S. Civil War, so go figure. It is on this day in 1973 that President Nixon appoints Henry A. Kissinger as his Secretary of State. In 1978, on this day in 1978, rebel Sandinistas, they take control of the where am I at here? Of the National Palace in Managua, Nicaragua. They held 1,000 plus people for a couple days, and it was in protest, opposition to the government of Anastasio Somoza Debayle. I think I pronounced it right. Anyway, they didn't like his government, so they decided they're going to go storm the palace. They're going to take hostages, and they're going to keep these hostages for, a couple days. I didn't read any further into that as to what happened, what the aftermath was, but knowing what the Sandinistas did and how it wasn't an isolated incident. In the early 80s, there were some American nuns that were in Nicaragua that were brutally murdered. The government told the U.S. that it was these Sandinistas that did it, and they asked for U.S. help in taking out these Sandinistas. Years later, I would meet a guy who actually was one of those Sandinistas, and he was there. He saw it. He saw what happened. He told me it was the government soldiers, the Nicaraguan government soldiers that did that, to pin it on them so they could get the U.S. to help the Nicaraguan government wipe them out. And he was actually wounded in a firefight, but made it all the way to Mexico, jumped the border, got caught by ICE, had a story to tell, and the U.S. gave him asylum, but did not give his friend asylum, and his friend was executed upon his return to Nicaragua. That is, and then what the end result of that was, because he had told the U.S. what had actually happened down there, the U.S. withdrew its support of the Nicaraguan government in that conflict, and they were like, "You figure it out." Supposedly, so I don't know what really came about. I do remember that the Nicaraguan thing was on the nightly news, and then all of a sudden, after months of it being on the nightly news, they just stopped talking about it. So there may be some truth to what Oscar told me. 1989. It's Major League Baseball. Texas Rangers, Nolan Ryan, which I've actually been to, the Ranger Stadium. My brother took me down there, and it's Nolan Ryan this, Nolan Ryan that. He has got a couple streets named after him. Any rate, it is on this day. He is, he's on the Texas Rangers. They are playing the Oakland A's, and he has his, it's one for the record books, 5,000 strikes, right? He struck out Ricky Henderson of the A's and registered his 5,000th strikeout. And he would end his career with 5,714 strikeouts for his career. And yeah, good times. So we got a couple more items, and then we'll be done. 2004. Have you ever seen the painting called The Scream? Yeah, it's pretty. I mean, it's virally on the internet. It's popular, but it's an 1893 painting. It's called The Scream. And on this day in 2004, it was actually stolen from the Munch Museum in Oslo, Norway. It would be recovered 2 years later. And we talked about this guy recently, on the 3rd, actually, because that was the day he died at the age of 95, on the 3rd. But it is on this day in 1908 that Henri Cartier-Bresson, he was a French photographer. Today is his birthday. He was born in Chanteloup, France, and he, if you recall, he was made famous by his photography, and I apologize for the shaking of the camera. His photography was that he took photos of people in real life situations, life on the streets, that sort of thing. It was very powerful, very poignant, and that was his claim to fame there. So I am on my way to work, and I haven't eaten. I doubt that I'm going to have time to eat, but I should be able to punch in on time. We'll see. At any rate, that's this day in history for August 22nd. We will be back again tomorrow for August 23rd with more historical goodness, and maybe the weather will lighten up because it's kind of cloudy and like it's trying to rain and all that other good stuff. So Be blessed, take care, and we will see you tomorrow. And with hopes that I'll get my butt out of bed a lot earlier so that I'm not mad scrambling like I am today. Good thing is that work is providing burgers and dogs for barbecue picnic, today, so I didn't have to bring lunch. So there you go. All right, be well, be blessed, take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.